Good evening and welcome to the first part of the Nomads land units tutorial. The Nomads are the 5th faction of Supreme Commander, added to the game by the players, and the mod is actually under very active development right now. You can check it out yourself by joining us on Forged Alliance Forever and hosting a Nomad game. And this video is supposed to give you an idea of how the Nomads T1 land units work. We're going to compare them to the T1 land units of other factions, and this should give you an idea about the balance. And at the same time, this can provide some feedback to the developers of Nomads, who are actually also watching this video. Hello, Cookie. And hopefully this mod is going to be integrated into the default Forged Alliance Forever soon. Because a 5th faction for Supreme Commander? Hell yes! So let's start by taking a look at the Nomads T1 Engineer. T1 Engineers come in 2 types. They either hover or they don't. If they hover, submarines cannot target them unless they have a deck laser when these engineers travel on the water. So the hover ability actually adds some extra survivability to the engineer. This usually comes at the cost of having a little less HP than non-hover engineers. The most tanky hover engineer in the game, without the Nomads balance, is the Seraphim engineer at 125 HP. And the Nomads T1 engineer has 130 HP, and that makes it the most tanky hover engineer in the game. Pretty cool, right? Next on the list we have the Silhouette. This is the Nomads T1 Land Scout. And that is actually a very good scout. Just like engineers, scout come in 2 types. So here we have the Combat Scout of the Seraphim. This one is a hybrid between a non-combat T1 Land Scout and a light assault bot. This is more expensive than other scouts, but it's also stronger. Because it's more expensive than the non-combat scout, including the Silhouette, we can pretty much leave this out of the picture and just consider these 3. Now, the Silhouette is going to outperform the Snoop in terms of firepower. It has higher DPS, so this is going to kill a Snoop. That makes it a very good unit. In terms of comparing it to the Spirit, we observe that both of these units have hoverability. So this one is also floating and it can cross the water, which makes it a good unit on maps like Whitefire, where you can scout your enemy with a land unit very early on. And in terms of speed, these 2 are actually the same as well. So once a Silhouette manages to reach a Spirit with its gun, the Spirit can't really get away, and the Silhouette is just going to kill it. And while the Mole, that one is relatively slow, it has less HP and it doesn't have a gun. Well, it comes with the Cloak ability, but that won't help against the Silhouette, which has radar. So all in all, these 3 scouts are going to lose against the Silhouette, which makes the Silhouette the best non-combat scout in the game. And if you do want to compare the Silhouette with a combat scout, then you would probably say that the Silhouette is still better, because these 2 have the same radar range. However, the Silhouette has an anchor ability that lets it extend its radar range at the cost of being unable to move. But that's probably fine. You can switch that off anytime and it will move again. And well, if you compare the cost of these 2, then the Silhouette is much cheaper. So this is probably the best T1 Land Scout in the game. Over here we have the Azator. This one is a light tank, but actually is like a light assault bot, not like the Aurora. And this has the same combat capabilities as a Hunter. 65 HP on both of these units, but the Azator has a great advantage. It hovers again. This can cross the water, so on Navy maps, Nomad players are going to have a huge raid advantage in the early game, because they have the cheapest raid unit in the game that can actually reliably kill things. So a very good unit. And it actually has a very bold name as well. The name Azator comes from Aza, which is like a title or position among gods, and Thor comes from Thor, the Norse thunder god. So extremely bold name, but considering the abilities of this very strong unit, this probably deserves such a name. Over here we have the Bandit. The Bandit is a medium tank, just like the Striker, and you can directly compare those 2 in terms of combat capabilities. The Bandit is slightly less tanky than the Striker, but the Striker has slightly less DPS than the Bandit. In terms of fire cycle, we observe that this thing shoots 5 times. In the same time, the Striker is going to shoot 4 times. So the Bandit actually has the better fire cycle, and it doesn't tend to overkill as much. a unit that can kill a striker, or draw a striker in this case, when these two fight against each other, then it's going to be a mutual knockout and none of them survives, is already a very good tank. But it has some extra benefits. So this one is again a hover tank, just like the Aurora. And that makes it sort of inherit the best ability of any T1 tank in the game, sort of. So really good, but we haven't even talked about speed yet. You may have guessed it, in terms of speed, the Mantis is the fastest T1 land unit in the game, the Tham comes second, and the Bandit positions itself in between those two. So it's the second fastest T1 tank in the game, and since it doesn't really have any drawbacks, it is just a really good unit. It's probably a little bit too strong. Now there's some things I don't like about the Bandit. First would be the name. So Bandit is actually NATO code for an aerial radar contact that is confirmed to be hostile. You would say something like bandits at 3 o'clock, and you mean something like there are incoming enemy air units on your radar on your right side, please intercept them and shoot them down, something like that, right? And you can see how bandits is just way shorter than that. And some Supreme Commander players actually use military terminology when they play the game and when they communicate in the voice chat, and it doesn't help. So the term bandit is already used in other ways, and for the developers of Nomad, this probably means please rename this unit. That would already make it better. And now the Aurora, which is also a hover tank, has this tumbling animation. You can see how it's tumbling to the sides. It's never straight in the air without moving at all. And the Bandit doesn't have this. Now, next we have the Barrager. And the Barrager is not a floating artillery. Thank God, that would be so overpowered. But it is still very strong because it's a hybrid between a mobile anti-air and an artillery unit, and it sort of gets the best of both worlds. Because in terms of offensive combat capabilities, it is on par with the Medusa, the Cybran Arty. So you could say it's maybe slightly worse than the Medusa, since this doesn't have the electromagnetic impulse, and well, the damage, I guess, is comparable. So not a bad Arty at all, but it also has the tankiness of a mobile anti-air unit. You can see how the Arty is at 140 HP, and the mobile anti-air unit is at 260 HP, and this has 280 HP, so it clearly inherited the stat of the mobile anti-air unit and not the mobile Arty. So this is going to win against other mobile Arty units for sure, simply because of how survivable it is. And well, it has onboard anti-air. So imagine dropping 10 of these in a T2 transport at somebody's island. They're traveling towards that player's base. Let's say there aren't many land units in the base of the defending player, and this is actually a pretty realistic assumption. Now, the defending player would probably react with T1 or T2 air, perhaps gunships or T1 bombers, and the Barragers can actually defend themselves very well against these. They can tank the bomb of a T1 bomber, and they can just shoot down any of these air units. So, very strong. In terms of costs, they're comparable to the Phobo. So this costs, I think, 55 mass, and the Phobo is at 52 mass. So these are as expensive as a T1 tank. But that's totally fine, because they're also better than other Arties. And I believe the Barrager is significantly better than the Phobo. That makes it an extremely strong unit, probably overpowered. And I didn't even talk about its ability yet. So the normal fire cycle of this unit is relatively slow, but you can actually press this button. Oh, I had it pressed, forgive me. So now the fire cycle is relatively slow, but the Arty is fairly accurate. Now if you press this button, then the fire cycle is going to speed up, but the spread between those projectiles is also going to increase, which makes it less accurate. So by pressing this button, you pretty much turn it into a Medusa in terms of accuracy, but you have the fire cycle of maybe a Phobo, so it's probably a pretty good ability. And if you want to target larger groups of enemy units or structures, then you should activate this ability at all times, pretty much. Now over here we have the Assassin. The Assassin is a tank destroyer. This is a fairly strange unit. It is very slow and it fires one very strong shot that delivers 300 damage, that is capable of one hit killing a striker that doesn't have veterancy. And it takes around 9 seconds to reload. So in terms of tankiness, it's comparable to an Aurora. You can see the HP is very similar. And in terms of range, well, this has higher range than the short range tanks, like the Striker, but this has lower range than the Aurora. However, this also has an anchor ability, which makes it unable to move, but it extends the range quite a bit. And that makes it outrange an Aurora. So this unit can pretty much outrange the tanks of other factions and one-hit kill them, and Kai to some extent. And if it's facing Aurora, well, it won't be able to move, but it can still outrange them if you use the anchor toggle. And not being able to move against Aurora is not such a huge problem, because Aurora is fairly slow. So you could probably fire at the Aurora, toggle the anchor again, and then retreat. So probably a strong unit, but also relatively difficult to use perhaps. And since the Bandit is such a great unit, I would probably recommend building Bandits rather than tank destroyers. Now these were the Nomads T1 land units. They're all fairly strong, and I believe some stat reductions are in order to make this faction more balanced. But since I haven't taken a look at the T2 and T3 land units yet, perhaps this is just supposed to be their strength and the other tech levels are going to be weaker. Who knows? We're going to figure that out in the next tutorial. Now some of you are probably here because they want to see how my recommendation for a standard T1 unit composition for the Nomads looks like. And I would recommend to build 5 Bandits, because the Bandits are probably the best tank in the game if you play with Nomads. That's why you would use the same composition as for Aeon, which used to be the old best tank in the game, sort of. You would not build extra arty and extra anti-air because you have both in the same unit, so just one is fine for this group. You would have 1 scout, so stuff has vision, and you have this engineer. Now keep in mind, all of this stuff floats. The arty would probably stay at home and be dropped somewhere if you play on an island map. And the engineer, of course, can grab the reclaim. It floats, so it can be killed by Aeon T1 submarines and some T2 submarines. So all in all, a very good unit composition, I believe. Further testing will reveal whether mixing in assassins is a good idea and what their share should be. But for now, I just recommend sticking with the bandits. So I hope people enjoyed this video and enjoy playing with the Nomads with your new knowledge. Now just a very short teaser for the patch on Saturday. Here is a change made by Cookie Noob. Remember how the hover effects of the Nomad T1 land units have been either white or green? Well, this has been changed now. In the next patch, they are going to get dynamically colored depending on the player color. And that's not the only change. The Barrager is also going to get improved firing behavior. This unit has to fight against aircraft sometimes, and sometimes it has to fight against ground targets. Whenever it encounters both at the same time, it's a little bugged, and the new toggle function is going to improve its behavior. So you can see, this mod is being very actively developed, exactly what we like to see at FAF. Big thanks to Cookie Noob and his team, and leave them some feedback.